Hi, Coastline Small Groups. My name is Reinhart and I am the Young Adult Next Steps Coordinator here at Coastline Church, and it is so good to be here with you. We're talking about closing out our Rhythms series. Hasn't it been such a great series from Pastor Alistair and the team at West Shore as well, Pastor Laura? It's been such a great time together. And what we've been talking about as we've been closing our series is that a spirituality endures when it happens at God's speed, when it happens at the speed of grace, not culture's pace. It's not a quick fix. We gotta make our spirituality work instantly. We need to be transformed instantly. God doesn't expect us to be transformed instantly in our spiritual walk, but He is faithful to finish what He started. And He has grace for us. He is patient with us. Thank you, Jesus. And there's grace for when our rhythms will get interrupted, when failures might happen, when life gets messy. The goal is not perfection in our spirituality, but what we talked about is our rhythm sustainable? Is how we're following Jesus actually sustainable for the long haul? So where do we need to slow down and trust God's pace for our lives? What are the small, consistent steps at God's speed that is not sprinting ahead, but walking steadily? I remember when I was in Manitoba. I grew up there for the first 20 years of my life, and every winter there would be this giant snowfall. And we lived right next to a church, so there was this huge snow hill because they would plow all the snow over to get a bulldozer to get all the snow over. And we would have to wait periodically for a different kind of snow to arrive, for the snow to get compacted. Maybe it would get a little bit warmer in the weather, and so then the snow would start to melt, and then it would freeze, and it would be more hard and compact, not just that powdery snow. And I remember every year, my brother and I, we would wait for that time for the snow to get just right so that we could build tunnels inside the snow hill. It was this epic thing where we would bring our shovels and we would be digging through this snow hill and creating these, we call them the domes. So you go on top of the snow hill, there's a little hole, and it's this giant room inside the snow hill. Our goal was basically to excavate the entire interior so it looks like a snow hill from the outside, but it's actually just the structure, like an igloo. And so we would have so much fun with that. But as we did it over the years, we learned a couple lessons. Number one, if we rushed it, if we just went at it really quick, usually something wrong would happen. Either the hole itself would cave in on itself, or maybe we didn't wait for the snow to be the right kind of snow. And so it would just be powdery and nothing would actually stand. Nothing would last the whole winter. And so we would have to choose the times when we are excavating it. We would have to look at how we're doing it. Where are we cutting? Where are we using? Even what kind of shovels we're using. That would make an impact on how our fort would end up being good. And in our spiritual walk as well, we need to not rush into things and hope that instantly it takes place. But we need to learn to slow down, to assess, okay, what is God doing in this moment? And how can I move at His speed so that I can walk in wisdom, that I can walk in prudence and not just rush through my spirituality? And our passage today that I want to bring us to is Matthew 11, where Jesus, He says in verse 28 to 30, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Jesus, He first begins by saying, "Come to me." That's the first step in our spiritual walk. It's easy when we say, okay, we're going to follow Jesus. Let's sprint ahead. Let's go after this. But first, we need to actually be with Him in order to become like Him with our spiritual walk, with our spiritual rhythms. And I can't help but be reminded of the story of Mary of Bethany, where Jesus comes into the house and Martha's running around. She's making sure she's hosting well. Everyone's doing everything right. But Mary decides to sit at the feet of Jesus. And Jesus, he responds by saying, Mary chose the good portion, which would never be taken away. And in our pursuit of Jesus, in moving at God's speed, we don't do rhythms just for rhythm's sake. We are choosing to live like Jesus, to be with him and become like him because he came to give us life to the full. We're designed to sit at the feet of Jesus. When we come to him and we learn from him and move at his pace, that's where we find rest for our souls. Jesus, he starts off by saying, are you weary? Are you burdened? Come to me. Sometimes in our spiritual walk, we actually find ourselves weary. We find ourselves overwhelmed. And that's a sign for us to slow down and come to him and find rest in our rhythm. Because following Jesus, it's not about adding more rules, but it's really about finding the delight of relationship with Jesus. Jesus, he also says that this is an easy burden, that his yoke is easy, his burden is light. Following Jesus, creating a rhythm for your life, it's not about an unbearable weight and adding more rules. This is meant to be a journey that's life-giving. I can't help but think of Psalm 16, where, the Lord, he says to the psalmist, or the psalmist is saying to the Lord, that I find delight, I find the fullness of joy in your presence because you've made known to me the path of life. And Jesus, he who is life, he has made known to us the path. And as we're choosing our rhythms of upward, inward, outward, and withward, we want to experience that life-giving way of following Jesus. The boundary lines, they've fallen for us in pleasant places. God, he invites us to find joy and life in our rhythms. At the end of the day, all of this is meant to help us discover who Jesus is and who he made us to be. So I want to throw out some questions for you guys. Think honestly about your current spiritual rhythms. Are you running at God's speed or are you sprinting? What would it look like to, in one area, slow down to God's pace? Jesus, he also mentions rest, and he promises it for those who are weary and burdened, who are willing to come to him. So where do you need to extend grace for yourself like Jesus does? Jesus, he sees our weariness, how overwhelmed we are, but he extends grace and says, hey, it's okay. Come to me. Reorient things. Put the main thing in the main thing. Put the first things first. So are you extending grace to yourself as Jesus does? Where and how might Jesus be inviting you back gently rather than condemning you or convicting you? So this week, I want you to do 3 things. First, review your rhythm. Actually look at it. See how is it being ordered? How are you doing your rhythm right now? And second, identify an area where, hey, I might need to extend some grace to myself in this area. I might need to actually allow myself to slow down. I don't need to do it perfectly because that's not the goal. It's endurance for the long haul. And third, commit to one rhythm long term. Review your rhythm, find an area where there's grace, and commit to that one rhythm for the long haul. We hope you have an amazing small group time, a great discussion. We love you, church, and we'll see you next week.